Evening, everyone, and welcome to the college admissions kickoff for the class of 2023. And the parents of the students of the class of 2023, we're very happy to welcome you here tonight. We love doing this presentation because it's exciting and it's fun, and you might not be feeling that way, but we do love this work, and we love helping the students as they start to think about their future and their college search. So thank you for joining us tonight. With us tonight is our counseling team, and the first one I can see in my little screen is Lisa Futrell, one of our counselors, Dylan Mullen, our associate director, and Mr. Noel, one of our counselors. So my name is Brenda Poznansky, and I'm the director of school counseling and admission at BG, and we are very happy to have you here tonight. We're sorry that it didn't work out that we could all be together. We're just nervous about the ice, the pending storm, and with people traveling such a distance to get to BG. So one more time virtually, hopefully when we all see you again in September for the second part of this kickoff, when we really kind of dig in for senior year, we'll have you all in person. So thank you for joining us. And we have a pretty packed program tonight, so I'm going to get going. So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is a timeline. The counselors have put together a nice timeline to help students, help you stay on track. It's one of those things that you can copy and put on the refrigerator so everybody can see it. And that way you can keep track and try to stay on time with all this. And we'll get into that in much more detail. We're also going to talk about the college search and building a good and solid, viable college list. And what does that look like and how do you do that? We're also going to talk about what colleges are looking for. What are they looking for in candidates? There's some things that have changed over the last 3 years, like everything else. And so we're going to touch on that. And then what's next, what's coming up, what to think about, additional information that we're going to share with you as we move into the spring months and the summer before you start your senior year, and so that you're prepared when you come back senior year to really hit the ground running with this process. So the first thing I'd like to just say is that before we kind of get into that, I do want to say that this can be a very overwhelming process. We understand that it's stressful for the entire family. One of the reasons we ask students and parents to join us with this webinar is because it's really important for everybody to hear the information the same time, the same way, because it can get really overwhelming. There's a lot of information to absorb. We've really narrowed down what we're talking about tonight so we don't overwhelm you, but it's really important to keep in contact with your son or daughter's school counselor. Students, very important for you, and you're going to hear this throughout the whole presentation. Be in touch with your counselor, be in touch with your counselor. We will be your partner in this process, and we will help you get through it. We will help you put the best foot forward, have the best application you can have. We'll do all of that, but you have to meet with us. You have to be part of it. It's a partnership. So moving on from that, we do want to address sort of the elephant in the room, what happened in college admissions with COVID. The pandemic has changed how we visit campuses, for instance. Many more campuses have virtual tours on their websites. They promote both coming to campus and also virtual tours. Coming to campus has opened up over the last 6 to 8 months, but it's still different. They handle the campus visits very differently. Before, you could sign up and there'd be large group sessions and things like that. Now it's on appointment basis in smaller groups. So they're not quite back 100%. However, they're getting there. And by the time the summer comes around, the hope is that they will be fully open, fully operational. What has happened this year, many of the students were unable to go into dorm rooms, for instance, and see what the dorm rooms look like. And that's always been typically a part of the tour. You know, you want to kind of see where you're going to be staying. So that's where a virtual tour can be helpful, because they do take pictures of the dorm rooms and sort of the inner sanctums of the college. So it's important to understand that that is available. Campus visits are opening up, but it has sort of changed how students and families are visiting campus. There's a change in the application process. In the past, the application process was pretty straightforward. There were certain things that colleges always looked for and really had as their criteria. It's different now. Many schools who were always test schools that require testing or were test optional have changed that process. So it's really important for students and families to understand that the college process isn't quite as generalized as it was before. Now, it never was that generalized, but there was more processes that were similar. They're a little bit different now, and we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about what colleges are looking for and how this pandemic has changed that and what they're weighting as more important in the process. It's changed since before the pandemic. It's created more competition for incoming classes. You would think the opposite because some students have decided to do other things instead of going to college. But what happened is with the reduced number or the increase in the number of colleges that have reduced their use of SAT or ACT testing, more students are applying because they don't have to submit their test scores. So because of that, their numbers of applicants has just increased. It's ballooned in many institutions, not all, but many. And so because of that, the competition is stiffer. So students have to really think through that. When they're talking that they're accepting, 12% of the applicants, 3% of the applicants, 30% of the applicants, they mean that because what's happening is they have so many that they have to narrow it down. So that has changed over the last couple of years. And obviously the pandemic has had an impact on testing and its weight in the admissions process, as I mentioned before. And so many colleges decided to not use them because of the access issue for students and have kept to that. So that's another piece that we'll continue to talk about throughout this presentation. The pandemic has required students to enhance their application in different ways. There are questions now on the Common App, for instance, about what you did during COVID, like what was your school in session? Did you volunteer? Did you sit in the basement and play video games? What did you do? They're asking more questions about that. So your essays and your supplements, they want to see volunteer opportunities, things like that. So COVID has changed some things for the better in some ways. SATs are not as important and some schools are not using it at all, or ACT. And they're looking more closely at your application instead of just grades, courses. They're really digging into the applications in a different way. So in some ways, although the pandemic has been awful, in some ways it has enhanced this process to be more personalized. So that can be a good thing. So again, students, this is your process. The only one that can go to college in this process is you. So it's your process. It's important to own this process. Doesn't matter what your friends are doing. It doesn't matter what your cousins did. It doesn't matter what Uncle Fred did 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. This is your process now. The process is entirely different than it was even 10 years ago. So you have to own this process and we will be there to help you, but it's your process. We will guide you, we will support you, but we're not going to tell you what you are supposed to be doing. You need to work with us. That's really important to know. And parents, this is the student's process. Where you as a parent are patient, supportive, consistently encouraging the student to take ownership of the process will be so helpful in this process. One of the things that we find as counselors, and you're going to see this so much, is that students tend to lose their voice and their identity in this process because so many people are talking to them about college. So next Thanksgiving, you're going to see family and this may have already happened to you. They're going to say, hey, how are you? Where are you applying to college? Where'd you apply? What are your thoughts for college? Instead of the answer to the question, how are you? I'm okay, I'm overwhelmed, whatever the case may be, they're going to ask you about college. And people always have something to say about college all the time. 30 years ago, not as many people had graduated from college. 50 years ago, less. Now, almost everyone you run into is a college graduate or has some post-secondary training or education. So everybody thinks they know the process. We're here to tell you, we do it every day. The process changes every year. It's not a predictable process. And over the last 2 years in particular, it has changed dramatically. So again, this is a process. It's called that for a reason. It's not a sprint. It's definitely a marathon. But parents and students, this is the students' process. And our part in the process is we understand that it's a student's process, and we offer support, encouragement, and guidance throughout. And everything from building that list to figuring out where you're going to deposit to supporting financial aid questions, we'll be there for the whole run. However, know that it's important for you to own this, students. And it's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, there's going to be times where you're frantic and you have to get everything done and you apply, and then there's a lull because you have to wait for the decision. So it kind of it goes peaks and valleys throughout. So understand that it's not always smooth, but we can help you make it smoother than to help you. We can make it smoother for you. And the other thing is, don't listen to anyone. Like, listen to us, because we know what and your parents, but don't listen to your friends. Don't listen to, people who, your neighbors who know somebody who went to that college and this is what happened. Things change. Colleges are very fluid. They're very organic. They're always growing. They're always changing. They're always building things and adding programs and things like that. So that's the fun about this search is you can find so much out about all these different places. And there's so many wonderful colleges in the country that you don't have to go to the top 5. You don't have to apply to where everybody else is applying. Apply where you feel you're going to make the best of your life, of what your goals are and who you are as a person and where you can grow. Those are the important things. But people are going to try to tell you and talk to you about it all the time. So I'm going to ask you all to make a pledge to not listen to other people. Do this process on your own. It's your process, and we're here to help you and support you. So now I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Noel, who's going to talk about the timeline.
Thank you, Mrs. Poznansky. Good evening, everyone. I'm sure many of you are questioning where your child should be in this process right now and what upcoming events that they should be participating in. In the next couple slides, I'll talk about what is coming up. In February and March, your student should be going onto their College Board accounts or logging into act.org to start registering for the upcoming spring sessions of SAT testing and ACT testing. There are tests throughout the spring and also into the fall of their senior year, August through December. We will be posting reminders and important information on the Counseling Class of 2023 page on MyBG. So make sure your student becomes very familiar with this page, as any pertinent information that comes up about the college process, we will be posting on there, such as scholarship information, deadlines to turn forms in, et cetera, et cetera. During the months of February and March, your child should be meeting with their school counselor. We will begin working with them to start building that college list, talking about different options, getting their interests in different majors and opportunities for them at different schools, whether they be something local or a little bit further out. Once they have that list going, they can take time over February break, which is a great opportunity if you are staying local or maybe traveling abroad a little bit and checking out some different colleges, starting to get that feel for the college campus and what this is actually going to be like for you. Once we come back from February vacation, we will begin course selection. This will also be a nice time to check in with your counselor too, to start talking about courses for next year. If you are thinking about going into a nursing major or a engineering program or any of the different options that they have out there, we can help guide them in building a really strong schedule for them for their senior year so that they're taking the right courses that will help build success for them when colleges are looking at their transcript and preparing them for their future. During course selection, we will be talking to your students about the teacher recommendation forms. Students will need to have 2 teacher recommendations as part of their college application process, as well as a counselor recommendation. So it's really important that your student connects with the school counselor, and we will help guide them through this process. At the end of March, we will be having a career fair. We invite professionals through the community, some who are BG alum and others that we are closely connected to. And this will be an opportunity for your student to start meeting professionals and asking questions about what their pathways were and what did they do in high school through college to get them where they are. This will help give them some perspective about future careers and what is out there. If your student is interested in either attending any of the military academies or going into an ROTC program, it is really important to meet with their counselor sooner rather than later. There are a lot of different steps in this process in applying to these academies, some of which need to be started sooner rather than later. So please make sure your student connects with their school counselor. In the spring, NEAF, the New Hampshire Higher Education Assistance Foundation, will be holding a destination college program similar to the program you are attending now on April 9th. We will also recommend for your student to attend the college fairs. BG will be offering our college fair on April 19th. And then we will also be promoting various virtual college fairs as well. So in case if there's some schools that you aren't able to go visit or some that you may be interested in, you can visit them virtually and have a conversation with an admissions representative. And we will be posting up more information on the counseling class page of 2023 MyBG. So make sure you're referring to that. In May, the letters of recommendation from 2 teachers are due. So please make sure you talk to your teachers sooner rather than later. Over the summer months, this is another great opportunity to go out and go tour some schools. And if you can't go out, make some time and do a virtual tour. Connect with the admissions offices. They really like to hear from the students to know that they are interested in their particular schools. Over the summer would be a great time to prepare for testing. This would be a good time if you didn't do as well as you had hoped on your SATs, to maybe take a SAT prep class. BG does offer an SAT prep class over the summer. We also can recommend you to other resources out in the community to help your student take a class. Remember that an SAT prep course is like taking another class. We encourage students to do this in the summertime and not during the school year, only because they are already juggling 7 to 8 different courses at BG, and we don't want to overwhelm them too much with this process. So over the summertime, taking one class to help them focus on their SAT would be a great idea. And then over the summer, making sure that you're staying active. So as Mrs. Posnanski said, maybe this is a time that you are working out in the community, or you're doing your volunteer work, or whatever it is that we can help you add to your college resume. This would be a great opportunity to do it over the summer. And next, I'm going to pass on to Mrs. Futrell to talk about the college search.
Thank you, Mr. Noel. So the college search, it can be very intimidating when you start the college search. And there's a lot of information and questions that you will ask yourself. So really, how does one begin the college search? Mr. Mullen's going to talk a little bit later about the tools we use to do a college search, but there are some questions that students should ask themselves. Really, what would be a really good fit for them? Is there a perfect college? Sometimes students will go to a school and feel like, you know, they really like the school. It could be because the atmosphere, the students on campus, what they have to offer, the experiences that they could have. Maybe they have study abroad. Maybe they have a co-op. Maybe it's a big campus and they like that field. Maybe it's a smaller campus that's not in a big city. So what are the things that the campus offers the student? And what is it that they're looking for at that school? And then, is it realistic? One of the things that we've seen over the past few years at some schools that typically we've seen students be accepted at are now getting 10 or 20,000 more applications because they're no longer SAT, ACT schools. So they're test blind or test optional. And that being said, it makes it a little more difficult when they're getting 10 or 20,000 more applications for them to decide which students fit their campus. And so students that look different 2 or 3 years ago are, you know, they're looking at their essay more closely. They're looking at what opportunities they've had in high school and what they've done for community service. So what is realistic for a student now might have been different 3, 4, 5 years ago. So keeping that in mind when you're looking at a school is very important. We hate to see students be disappointed when they're thinking about this process, that they're aiming for schools that may not fit, you know, what they are as a student. So, you know, when we talk about their transcript and the courses that they've taken, what they've done for community service or activities, if they've had a job, have they helped at home, all of those things make them who they are as a candidate for admissions. And those are things that we talk about when we go through that process with them. So they want to really think about what's important to them as they're going through this process. And that's why we really want them to start with a larger group of colleges and kind of really look at what's out there before they kind of pare down what they're thinking they would like. They also want to think about the schools and what their major might be. You know, if they're looking for nursing, they're going to want to throw a wider net. And I think with the current situation and the nursing shortage, there's going to be more students probably looking into that field. So they might have to spread even wider nets outside of New England and other areas, because that tends to be a major that takes smaller numbers just because of the number of students they can fill in the seats in each college. So those are things that we talk about when we meet with the students and go through the process. So when you're building a list, we usually talk to students about what's a reach school, what's a target school, and what's a realistic school. So a reach school is a school, and again, when we go through and we talk about SCORE, which is the tool we use to look at colleges and make the list, we have this program on there that's a scattergram, and it shows where students fall within like grade point average, SAT scores, if schools still take them at this time, you know, things that they look for and how they kind of fit in that profile. So if a school has a grade point average and they've accepted students from BG that have a 3.9 or better, we can kind of see where that student would fit on that profile of that college. And then we can kind of get an idea looking back of, you know, maybe what classes that student had taken, or, you know, just to get an idea of would that student also fit that school's profile. So that is kind of how we figure out what a reach school is for a student. So if you meet that grade point average, if you take a challenging course load, you know, if you have strong SAT scores, if they're still accepting them, those are the things that really kind of fit. Is it a reach school? So, you know, a lot of the Ivy Leagues and the highly competitive schools would fall in that category, and are very difficult to get into, take a very small percentage of students. Target schools are schools that are very good fit for many reasons. And that could be their target school because financially it's a school that you can afford. That's another very big thing to consider when you're looking at schools. Schools, you know, that offer merit scholarships. You know, that's a big consideration for a lot of students. College is very expensive. Sometimes those higher tier schools do not offer a lot of merit scholarships. And if you are a student that has done well academically and they offer merit scholarships, and you know, go to a school that maybe offers admission to 40 to 50% of the student body and you're admitted, you might, you know, find that you get a larger merit scholarship than if you went to a school that had a smaller percentage that they admit. So a target school might be a good fit for you know, the financial piece, but it also might be a good fit for where you fit grade point average and for the classes that you've taken. Maybe it's location, maybe it's the major. So all of those things tied together make that school a target school for you. And it's one that fits who you are as a student, what you've done in terms of your academic profile and your activities. And so that's a target school for many students. So it's a good fit for all those reasons. A realistic school is a school that is reasonable for a variety of reasons. You know that the environment is good for you. It would be a school that maybe financially, if everything else doesn't work, you know that it would be a great place that you would like to attend. It fits your, you know, your budget. It's someplace you could see yourself at, it has a major that you want, and you know that it's a place that you would be able to get in, you know, because they have a high acceptance rate and it checks off all of the boxes. It's always good to have a realistic school or a couple realistic schools, just because you never know what the situation will be. This year, you know, we've seen a lot of kids be deferred from some of their schools that might have fit maybe more reach and target, just because, again, 10,000, 20,000 more applications that some of these schools have seen make it really difficult for them to, you know, decide how many students are we going to accept. So on paper, the students look very excellent, but when you have 20,000 more applications, it's hard to pick and choose how you make that class. So having a really balanced list is a great way for students to kind of go into this process, and we help them make that list. They really want to make sure when they're thinking about this to have a little from each area. You know, having many reach schools and maybe one or two target and realistic schools is not a very balanced list, because you're kind of heavy on one side. So breaking it down so you have some from each area is really a nice way to have the list. And again, college applications are very expensive. So when you're making this and you're asking, well, how many schools are too many? Try to be realistic. What can you afford? You know, if it's $60, $70, $80 for each application, you know, maybe 12 is a good number for you, maybe 15, but you know, you're going to have to make the decision once that time comes, you know, which schools did we get into, and you know, where do we have to choose from one. So if you have 20 schools, that could be a difficult decision. So trying to keep a number that is good for you and your family, I think, is very important. But that's kind of how we work through the process. But starting with a bigger list that you can work down to create this reach, target, and realistic list is a great way to kind of go through the process. And again, that's what we're here to help the students kind of work through. Starting, you know, they start in the spring, and then as we get to the fall, we can make that list smaller so that it has the reach, target, and realistic schools.
Sorry.
Nope, that's all right.
Not sure why it's not moving. There we go.
All right, so when you're building a list, this is the process that we use. We use SCORE or the College Board to research and support in building the list. So all of the students were sent an email to sign on to SCORE. That email lasts for 48 hours and then it will go away, but we'll continue to send that email to the students. It's very easy to sign up for SCORE. All they have to do, it actually takes and pre-populates their BG email. So they just have to create a password. Most students, I think, usually use their BG password so they remember it. And I highly encourage students to check their spam folder just in case it goes there, because I know that some students that's happened to them. We will send it out to them again so that they can have that access to that. And if, you know, we keep sending it out until we get them all on SCORE. So we have sent that to them. It should be in their mailbox today. So hopefully, you know, today, tomorrow, Saturday, they can sign in. They must be realistic when they're creating this list. Again, you know, it's changed, it's organic, it changes all the time when you're looking at college admissions. The past few years has been very different and it keeps us on our toes. Schools are getting, you know, tens of thousands more in terms of applications. So keeping that in mind is really important. And, you know, I know students are disappointed when there's schools that they really love, but keeping in mind that it's not, you know, just like they're choosing a school, it's like, you know, you're looking for a school is like a business, you know, it's kind of like that transaction. You're looking for a place, they're looking to fill seats. It doesn't mean that they're not fit for that school. You know, when you, again, 20,000 extra applications, it's really hard to narrow it down when you only need, you know, 2,000 students. So I like for them to keep that in mind, that it really is a difficult process when they're trying to pick that class. You want to meet with your counselor to go over your list. Don't let your friends, relatives, and other people get in your head, because it's really hard when they're like, oh, you should apply here, you should apply here. Apply where you feel comfortable, where you think you want to be. That's why visiting, doing virtual tours is so important. Start with that big list and narrow it down to make it manageable. Visit as much as you can, because that's going to really help you make that list and make it viable. And use the counseling class page of 2023 for any fairs and tours. Talking to admission counselors really help. I think seeing the classes and the schools, if you can, when they're in session, is helpful too, because you get a feel for what it's like. One of the things I do tell students is, if you can't visit now, you know, usually if you get accepted, there's an accepted students day. And if you can't get out there because it's too far away, or you can only do a virtual tour, try to use that part. And I know this is kind of down the road, but you get to see and feel what that school campus is like, and the students that are going to be in that class. So that's another way that you can kind of see what the school is like, and how the student life is like when you're there. So that's kind of building a list. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mullen, who's going to talk about the college search and score.
Thanks, Lisa. So as we've talked about, SCORE is the search engine that the school uses for those parents that have had siblings, or I'm sorry, for those parents that have had sons or daughters that have been through BG previously. We used Naviance in the past. It's just a different search engine. As Mrs. Futrell said, there was an email sent out today with a link for SCORE. So it's really important that the juniors create their account. All you really have to do is just click on the link, and then it automatically populates your BG email as your username. And then, as she said, you just type in your password, and then it'll automatically log you in. The important thing to know is that SCORE is not only the search engine for juniors, but it's also the way that we as counselors process all the information that we're going to send. So transcripts, letters of recommendation, and other school documents. So there's no other way for us to send that unless your son or daughter has created their account. So that's why we'll keep sending it until we have the entire junior class logged onto it, so we can make sure that we're going through it. So once a student is in SCORE, they'll see their homepage and it'll have like their demographic information and whatnot. But one of the things that SCORE has is the college search. So by doing that, as you can see on the screen, there's the option on the icon bar just to hit the colleges tab. What this will do is it'll bring up every college in the United States and Canada. So then you can do like a search option. And essentially what that will do is it will give you a list of questions or criteria. And the more specific you answer the questions, or the more options you click, the more precise your list becomes. So it just gives you a bigger and better idea of like what schools are out there. And the good thing is you can go in and out of this and change it all the time. So it's not like it automatically saves for you and you're locked into it. So what you can do is, if you're curious about a business major for the first time, you can go through and populate your information, and then all you have to do is just click on the icon on the right-hand side of the schools, and it'll add it to a following list. And that just essentially means that the school is now in that list for you. It doesn't mean you have to apply, or you can remove it at any time. But then if you change your mind after our career fair, college fair, you have the option to go back in and kind of just revisit and look at schools that may be on there. One of the things in the previous slides that we talked about was using the College Board website, and that's perfectly fine. That one is another good option. The only thing is that if you put schools on that list, we can't see it. So again, if you're gonna use anything, it has to, or if you're gonna add schools, just make sure you put them onto SCORE, because again, that's how we process all the information when it comes time for you to send your information in senior year. So we can't send anything until it's in your SCORE account. And we'll touch upon this stuff more heavily next fall when we go into it more in depth. And then I think Mr. Noel, Mrs. Futrell, and Mrs. Poznansky all talked about the importance of the class, the counseling class of 2023. It's important that when you're looking at this, you do the counseling class, because there is a class of 2023 option, but that's more for like the actual student body. This one is designed specifically for the students based off the counseling page. So on there, like they said, we're going to have scholarship information, job opportunities, and things that we feel are relevant for you moving forward as it relates to the college process and just everyday life at BG. One of the questions that was asked during the Google form was if there was a college checklist or timeline. If you actually go on to your son or daughter's counseling class of 2023 under the links tab, it's the first thing on there. So we updated it last week with information relating to basically last week until the end of next winter. So they'll be able to see the checklist and kind of see what we've done or what we would like them to do from a monthly breakdown. If there's any questions or if they have specific things about what they should be doing. Again, that's on the counseling class of 2023. So if it's not something you've been doing or utilizing, it's perfectly fine. But from this point on, it's really important that you use it to access all of the relevant information that we have or that we feel like you as rising seniors should know in terms of the rest of your college career. And then just kind of to reiterate what everyone's been saying about testing. So to sign up for the testing for SATs, you would go to the College Board account. And the important thing with this is when signing up is you make sure it's in your name. So don't use your mom or dad's email. Don't have an inappropriate email, because this is how the college is going to receive that information. This is the one piece of information that us as counselors cannot send. We don't have access to your College Board accounts. So when we went back into the classrooms 2 weeks ago at this point to explain the PSAT process, a few students had asked, I can't access everything. And we had to tell them that you had to either contact them or try and figure out using the forgot username or password, because that's the only way that they can access the account. But you certainly don't want to create a second account. So you want to make sure that whatever your account is, you write it down in your notes section or something on your phone where you're not going to forget it. And the same goes for the ACT testing. Again, it's things that are private to you. So you have to send that information when you get your results and ultimately when you want to apply to college. If you have questions about whether or not you should send the scores, by all means, you can come speak with your counselor and we'll talk to you and show you, the information that we have from trends of previous years as far as the acceptances and what their information has been relative to your scores. And then lastly, as Mrs. Futrell and Mr. Noel and Mrs. Poznansky have said, the upcoming tests would be in March, May, and June of this year. And there's also one starting in August. Just be mindful of March, May, and June tests, just because in May and June for any spring athletes, there's going to be probably conflicts on Saturdays. I know as a spring coach myself, that test in June always conflicts with the second round of the playoffs. So again, if you can get in a March or May test, certainly try and do that. Again, if it's possible, and you just sign up and pick a local high school that offers it. BG does not offer the test itself, but you can find any of either your public high school or a local high school within the area that will allow you to test. And then SAT prep courses, that was already talked about. But again, if it's something you feel like you want to do, like Mr. Noel said, it really takes up the time of what an academic class would be. So if you're given the option, we would like to see you try and take it over the summer, but obviously that's going to be up to you and your schedule. So if you have the time to do that, it's something we would encourage you to do if you want to.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mullen. So here's what colleges are looking for, basically. There's about 6 components of evaluating an applicant. So as the counselors have been sharing this year, and as I mentioned about COVID, this year has really sort of changed a lot of things, or the last 2 years, I should say. And the decisions right now we're seeing are really truly based on numbers, as opposed to any other time that we've seen this, because of all the things we've said, you have to cast a wide net. So it kind of enhances the numbers at all these colleges. And so it's hard to discern the students and who's a viable candidate for admission and who is not. So we sort of whittle down what they tend to be looking at. This is what colleges tell us that they're looking at. And at the end of the day, colleges that get 65, 70,000 applications really have to buzz through these applications. And so they're looking for very specific things. And then though, if those things are all there and a student gets into the accept pile, that's fine. If they don't have them, they get into the deny pile. That's fine. So the polar ends of the process sort of are easier for the colleges to manage. It's the middle, which is the most of the applicants, right? So it's sort of that bell curve situation where you have less on either end, but you have a lot in the middle, and you've got to really discern how you're going to mold your class. This is when lots of other things come into play. The initial read on any application is always going to be the courses that the student took. That's going to be the first read. They want to see the quality of the coursework. They want to see what the coursework is. That's when they look at school profiles. What is the core course offering at this high school? And so when we send out information to the colleges, we also send along a very detailed school profile, which is on the website. If you ever want to see it, it is on the website. And on that, we specifically talk about the number of units students need. We talk about grade point average, sort of where our average grade point average is. We talk about AP and what the parameters are around AP and honors for that matter, so that colleges really understand how students land where they are. So the quality of the coursework is really important. How the student has fared over time. So it's not just about freshman year, sophomore year, or junior year, or senior year. It's about all of the years. And they're not just looking at certain courses. This is sometimes a myth that we hear, well, PE doesn't count, art doesn't count, theology doesn't count. It does count. And this is why. Because when a college looks at the quality of a student's transcript and the courses that they've taken, they don't just look to see if they're good math students. They look to see if they're a good student overall. They're looking at, do they balance their math just as well as they balance their science, just as well as they balance their English, just as well as they balance their theology course. If they're a committed student, you're going to see some things that sort of level out over time. So there's always going to be a time in a student's life that they didn't do as well as they would have liked in a course. That's true for lots of different reasons. The course content did not resonate with them. The chemistry in the class wasn't something that was helpful for whatever reason. The student just, it was a class that they had to take, they just didn't understand it. It doesn't really matter. There's always a time. But over time, that's why they look at 4 years of a transcript or 3.5, is to see that everybody's allowed a blip, everybody's allowed not to be perfect, but do students recover? Is the trend or their trajectory going up or going down throughout high school? Because that's telling the college something. Which leads to grade point average, right? So that your grade point average follows you how you're going through your semester. For many students, their grade point average goes down over time because they're taking harder courses. So that's where the quality of the coursework balances out a grade point average difference. So when colleges are looking at coursework and grade point average, they're sort of married, they're sort of intertwined. Colleges want to see students challenge themselves. They don't want to see them oversubscribe so that their grades go down. So we often get this question, especially students, we had these questions, these conversations with you when you were registering for your junior year classes, because that's when AP was offered to you for the first time. Many students are, I'm going to take 5 AP classes. Well, we don't really let you do that. And we say that on the profile because we have found that students balancing more than 3 AP classes with the amount of work that's required for an AP class fall apart on the other ends. So other classes get compromised, and that's not a good plan. That's not a good strategy. Just because you think AP is going to look better does not mean that you can let your other classes fall. Because again, they're looking at how do you balance, how do you manage. College is not easy, so you're going to always be managing courses and other things. So how are you managing this? 5 is too many, 4 is a lot, 3 is really good if you're going to do AP. 2 APs, 1 AP is fine. Colleges are seeing you're challenging yourself. If you take an honors course in a course that you really want to challenge yourself in, you don't have to do AP. You can get into a very good college out of BG's curriculum without ever taking an honors course or an AP course. And it's not Harvard, it may not be BU, it may not be Tufts, but it's going to be a good college who might even offer you some merit money. So again, it's about, as Mrs. Futrell and the other counselors have been saying, it's balance, it's understanding the process. But don't think because you don't have honors or AP courses that this whole process is not going to work for you. It will, and we can get you there. So again, colleges are looking for an upward trajectory as you work your way through high school. So when students will say, you know, oh, I'm just going to slide through senior year, when Mr. Noel was talking on the timeline about course selection, the reason we bring that up is because you can't pump the brakes for senior year. At least not first semester, you can't. You've got to really show the college that you're continuing with world language. If you're thinking about, should I take that 4th year of world language? The answer to that is a resounding yes. And here's why. You pop off the page if you have 4 years of a world language. So if you have an aptitude for languages, I'm not saying everybody should do this, but if you have an aptitude for language, stick with it. Are you giving another honors course a chance? Like, are you still doing honors, or were you an honors student, then you all of a sudden decide you're not going to take any more honors courses because it's senior year and you don't want to deal with it? And not a good choice. That's not a good strategy either. So that you really have to be mindful and thoughtful when you're planning your senior year. One of the reasons we do the 4-year plan with students and kind of work our way backwards when we ask, where do you want to be in math in your senior year? Where do you want to be in science classes or wherever? We work backwards. This is what you have to do to get there. That's an important conversation because senior year is important, contrary to popular belief. Colleges will see up to your midterms. They'll see up to your midterm grades in the process. The other side of that is that if you're accepted and something changes pretty dramatically in semester 2, they will rescind their offer. And you never want to be in that position. So senior year really needs to be a thoughtful process. And also it's a time where you can also take a course or two that you've always wanted to take. And you think you might want to be a psych major, but you've never had a psych class. You think you might want to be a nurse, but you've only taken bio and chem. Maybe you should take anatomy. So those are times where you can kind of try something that is where your mind might be leading or your heart might be leading for a major. So again, quality coursework, grade point average, really important. Next thing is recommendations. And the recommendations are important because these are coming from teachers who have you as a student, who can speak to you as a student over a year's worth of time. So we recommend that you get a junior year teacher because 1, it's current, and 2, that teacher knows you for a longer period of time. It doesn't always have to be English or math or science. One of the advantages you have at BG is many students take 3 years of language. A language teacher would be great. Theology teachers are great because you really have to dig in those classes. Those are sort of not in the mainstream. They require a lot of writing. They require a lot of reading. They require a lot of studying. And it speaks to you as a student, a committed student. Computers, a computer teacher, it's a great, if you have, a year-long computer class or a year-long art class, any of those are also really good recommendations to get. If you are going into certain majors though, the colleges will tell you that you need to have a certain teacher recommend you. So if you're going into engineering, it's usually a math science. If you're going into health sciences, it usually is a science. If you're going into engineering, also it might be a math, depending on the school. But lots of times they want to see their math science and a humanities. And humanity, what I mean by humanities would be English, world history, social studies, world language, or theology. Those are the sort of the humanities side of things. When it comes to business, they absolutely want to see a math teacher. So there's certain recommendations that we will help you kind of decide on based on what you think your major is going to be. Just because it will hold a little bit different attention of the reader. These next three used to be in different order. This is where the last 3 years has really made a difference, where test scores used to be number 4 or number 3. And it's now moved down to the bottom, and that's purposeful, and I'll get to that. So number 4 and number 5 are a little bit interchangeable, or have been in the past, but now the essay has popped up a little bit more on the hierarchy. And the reason for that is many of the colleges, because of the numbers of students that are applying, really need something to evaluate a student on that is not sort of out of their control. And this is what I mean. The coursework is as good as the high school you go to, right? So if you're thinking you want to be a world language major and there's no AP world language at your high school, that's not your fault. So you're in constraints of whatever the high school offers, right? So you're fortunate at BG that you have a very strong college prep program, but not everybody does. So what they need to kind of pull out in the essay is who you are as a person, because your coursework, your grade point average, and your recommendations are sort of what they're going to be. But the essay really speaks to you as a student, as a person, gives colleges the idea of what you're thinking, who you are, what's important to you. Are you different? Are you different now than you were when you started high school, and what transpired during that time? We will never tell you that this is an easy part of the essay, or the application, excuse me. We will never say that to you, because it isn't. This is really different writing than you're used to. There's no perfect essay, but this is a personal statement. So it's a really important part of the application process. But it often stops the application process in its tracks, because you do all the perfunctory things, name, address, major, courses, all that kind of thing. And then you come to the essay, and they're big questions. It's not a small 3-sentence response. It's not that kind of writing. It's not academic writing. You're not responding to something that has a definite answer. So this takes a bit of time, and this has to be something that really is genuine, really is your writing as a student. Colleges can sniff out a 40-year-old's essay like none other. When it's overdone, when it's over edited, I call it when it's Botoxed, they can tell. And so it doesn't come across as authentic of a 17 or 18-year-old. So it's really important that you spend time talking with your counselor about this. You will go over this in English class in the start of senior year. We also offer an essay writing class over the summer. And it really does mean a lot in the process. It didn't used to. It didn't. It did, but it didn't, kind of thing. Now it really does. And your essay has to really speak from your voice. Extracurricular involvement is also key now, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a question on the Common App that probably will be there for the next 2 years or so. What did you do during COVID? Did you learn to cook? Did you help your grandparents? Did you shovel snow for neighbors? What did you do during those times when you weren't in school? Now, fortunately, we were in school most of the time, and then you can talk about that, but it was different. Your class was hit probably the hardest. The juniors right now were probably hit the hardest, same in college. So you started freshman year, you were there for a half a year, and then we were out by March 15th. Your sophomore year was hybrid for much of the year, and then you're back now full time. It was a very different kind of high school experience than any other classes had. So there's a lot to say about that, but there's also a lot you could be doing, right? And so if you didn't have that opportunity, you're going to talk about what school was like. Why was that different for you? It doesn't have to be bad. It could be talking about you learned a lot about yourself. You made new friends because the hybrid model gave you this opportunity to meet more of your classmates. Okay, so your extracurricular involvement could have been that you did something really different than you ever thought you would do, but it's also about what you have done. So if you're a student that's a 3-season athlete, you talk about that. You didn't get to do community service because you were doing service to the school by being part of a team. So don't underestimate that contribution to your school community. You may be in dance, you may be in scouts, you may be in whatever. So many times with extracurricular activities, students just put what's in the forefront of what they do, and they don't really dig in. You have an opportunity to put up to 10 different things that you do. Some kids tap out, other students are struggling, but it's because they're not really thinking about all the things that they do, and it can be a multitude of things. Colleges are not looking for a trifecta of some sort. They're not looking at the top. You have to be the editor of the newspaper, or you have to be the captain of the team, or you have to be a class officer. They're looking at, there has to be worker bees too. There has to be support people in clubs and organizations. So that's okay. You don't have to be the top name brand position in a club or organization. You could just be part of it and be a really strong member of it. So somebody who goes to every meeting, somebody who's been doing it since they were a freshman year. Colleges don't want a laundry list. They want involvement, they want commitment, and they want as much leadership as you can show. And again, leadership can just be doing the right thing and being a role model in whatever organization you're in. Last thing they're looking at right now is test scores. This is tricky, and I'm not gonna tell you it's not, because you really have to understand the criteria for each of the colleges you're applying to. And there's some vernacular that colleges use that can be really tricky. This is what makes it tricky. There's not a sort of a sweeping statement or generalized statement we can ever say about college admissions. Every college is different. One of the most common things we say, it depends. It depends on the college. It depends on the student. It depends on this. It depends on that, because it's as unique as that. Test scores have really shown us this. So as you know, most of us know about college admissions. Test scores was always part of the 6 components. Over time, for the last 20 years, it's been changing. There's been colleges that have changed their view on testing. And so they've either gone test blind, which means that they don't look at test scores at all. You can send them, but nobody's going to look at them. That's test blind. Or they don't even put it on there. We require no test scores. Same thing, test blind. Test optional is the tricky thing. Colleges, when COVID hit, they all said that we're going test optional, but then some went test blind. So test optional means that if you submit your scores to that college, you are telling the college you want your scores to be part of your application file, that you want to be evaluated based on your test scores. If you don't send them, no harm, no foul. They're not going to look at them. But if you do send them, you're giving them the signal that you want them as part of your admissions profile. So this is where it gets tricky. You're going to be signing up for your SATs, and you're going to have this opportunity to sign up and have 4 scores sent once you get your results. So you don't get to choose after you get your results if they go or not. You choose before, which doesn't seem fair. Okay, but some students will do that and they're unhappy with their scores, but now they've sent them to the college. So when they apply, they are there. So for when you take your SAT, especially the first one, do not send them to any schools unless you know of a school you're absolutely 100% applying to, and regardless, they're taking SAT scores, which are not very many colleges right now that are saying that. So again, have to really look at the college criteria. All right. So if you don't send them, they don't look at them. If you send them, they're going to look at them. So again, conversation with your counselor, think about your scores once you get them back. You can always send them later if you need to. You can also send them the second time you take the SAT. You can add those schools if you feel like you did pretty well and you want to sort of add to your application. Okay, but again, look at the criteria of the college, see where their test score ranges are. And because if they are test optional, they will give you the range in which they're looking at with scores. If you don't send them, they won't look at them. They're going to look at the other 5 components pretty carefully. So the other test score that I just want to mention, so that's ACT and SAT that I just was talking about with test optional or test blind. AP scores. So AP scores are not part of the admissions process ever. The score on the test is not part of the admissions process. The class on your transcript is part of your quality of coursework, but the actual score is never part of the admissions process. Where it comes into play is when you decide on what college you're going to go to in May of your senior year. You send that test score to that college and they will decide whether or not they're going to give you college credit for it. That's when the score comes into play. And you have to have a score of 3 or better for most colleges in order to get the college credit, but it is not part of the admissions process. And that's a really important factor. Students will ask us that all the time, and to send the scores. And again, we can't send any scores. We don't have them. They're all on your College Board account. And that's why when Mr. Mullen was talking about making sure your College Board account is correct, this is why it's important. And that's an account that you will have for the rest of your life. So if you apply to graduate school and they want your SAT scores, God forbid, you go to your College Board account. Okay, so that's an important account to know what is going on, or your ACT account, whatever you're using. These scores are also interchangeable. The College Board owns SAT, ACT owns the ACT test. Colleges look at them interchangeably. They don't have a feeling about, oh, you should absolutely take the SAT. No, you should absolutely take the ACT. They don't care. If they're requiring tests, they're requiring one of those 2 tests. Okay, Ms. Noel.
Thank you, Mrs. Posnanski. So in the fall, we will be hosting a financial aid evening. We have a fantastic presenter from NEEF, Karen Collins. She'll come in and talk about the FAFSA and how to navigate some of the financial aid and scholarships that will be available through the federal government and the colleges. I will post that date on the next slide. Also on our counseling class page on MyBG, we will be posting scholarships and information that we get into the counseling office onto that page. So it's really important that your student will check that site on a regular basis because we update it almost daily. If your student is interested in playing sports in college, particularly a D1 or D2 school, they will need to register with the NCAA at the eligibilitycenter.org. The link that is listed in the slide in front of me here. Please make sure you do that because you will not be able to play in college if you have not registered with the NCAA. College athletics and coaches, this can be a difficult and confusing process. Please make sure you utilize your high school coach in navigating and talking about the sports that you'd be interested in playing and how the recruiting process goes. Also think about your academics, the academic rigor of the college that you're thinking about. When you're taking classes at some of these top D1 schools, you're going to have a full college course load on top of workouts, practices, and games. So is it a smart idea for you to be able to balance all of these things in your time management skills? Or are you looking at a college where you will still find a challenge in your academic rigor and also find time to play? Also think about in college, if you get hurt or if you get cut from a team at one point or another, is this still a school that you can see yourself being a student athlete in? That's really important to think about as well. So as I said, in the upcoming, we will be hosting a college fair on April 19th. We will have another college information night for parents in early September. So we'll talk more about upcoming activities and programming through the fall and things that update you and your student on deadlines for applications and where we go to next. Again, that financial aid night is going to happen on September 27th at BG. Again, we will have a fantastic speaker to talk about how to navigate filling out the FAFSA and finding federal aid for your student. And then October 1st, that is the first application deadline date for students who will be applying to school's early decision. Over the summer, again, I reiterate to seniors, make sure you get out there, work, volunteer, do whatever it is that you do to keep yourself busy. And this will help build up your resume as you are applying to colleges.
So that's the presentation for tonight, but we're very happy to answer any additional questions you might have if you put it into the question and answer feature that is on your screen. And if, we'll do our best to answer anything that you have and would like us to talk about. But we definitely look forward to being your partner through this. And students, we're very excited for you as you enter this process because it can be really fun. If you look at it, it's really fun to go and see colleges and see all the different campuses. So if you look at it with a really positive and open mind, it can be really fun. So Mr. Mullen, do we have a question?
Yes, one person asked, what do teacher recommendations entail?
That's a good question. So there's a real difference between the teacher recommendations and the counselor recommendations. So the teacher recommendation typically talks to what their curriculum is about, how the student did with that curriculum, but also how the student was as a member of the classroom. So was the student engaged? Was the student prepared? Did the student contribute? How did they work in groups? So that's a lot of how those recommendations from the teachers go. Also, they talk about the skill. So if it's a skill class like a world language or math, they may speak to the level of skill that the student has. The counselor recommendation is very different because our recommendation, the students do not have to request a recommendation from us. We write a recommendation for every one of the students on our caseload, which can be a daunting task at times, just because of the number of students who apply to colleges at BG, but always great because it really reflects on your time that you've worked with the students. So we talk about growth, change over the time. That's why we always, when we were assigning counselors and students together their freshman year, it's important because we know that we're going to work with these students for 4 years. We're hoping to get to know the student well enough that that recommendation is really great to write and easy to write, and we can speak to their growth as a student at BG, sort of how they challenge themselves, what they added to the school community and all of that. So ours is a little bit more global, where the teachers is going to be more focused on that particular class. Any counselors, is there anything else that you wanted to add with that? No? Okay. Any other questions?
Not right now, no, that's it. There was
Okay.
one that I answered on the side, but that was it.
Okay. So we wanted to thank you then. If you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to your counselor. Students, come on down, start coming down, visiting, not tomorrow because you get to stay home, enjoy and stay in your pajamas. But anytime that you have questions, the other person that we really want you to get to know is Mrs. Michaud. Mrs. Michaud is our administrative assistant in the counseling office, and she is the one that presses the button that sends all your stuff to the colleges. So it's really important that you get to know her. She's someone who is really an amazing addition to our department and knows this process very well as well. And so she will direct you in the right direction to either see one of us, or she will help you, but get to know her. So if you haven't been in the counseling main area of the counseling office lately, go in and introduce yourself, because she's going to be an asset to you as you go through this process. But if your counselor isn't around, any one of the counselors, we all support each other. We all support students. We often collaborate on if we have a question about the college process. Do you know, have you heard about what do you know about this? So don't hesitate to ask any one of us for support or help if your counselor happens to be with another student. So we thank you very much for being with us. We hope that you stay safe and we don't get too much ice, but it is kind of nice that we have tomorrow to kind of reflect on this very, very tough week at BG and our school community and for our school community. And we keep that Mr. Champagne and his family in our prayers and our thoughts. And we hope that you have a great snow day tomorrow and a very nice weekend. Thank you so much. Have a nice night.